Hello everyone, and welcome to the Citrix Masterclass series. My name is Stephen Gallagher, a technical marketing architect at Citrix, now part of the Cloud Software Group, and I'll be your host today. Before we dive into today's session, I have a few quick reminders. As always, this session is being recorded and you will receive a link to the on-demand recording after the event when it is posted online. During today's masterclass, please submit any questions via the Q&A tab, and we will answer them via chat or here as they come in. So let's get started. For today's masterclass, Alex Rubio, Director of Product Management, will join me and discuss some of the new capabilities in the upcoming Virtual Apps and Desktops LTSR. I will then be joined by Emma Bland, a Senior Product Marketing Manager, and Egil Schmidt, a Lead Field Architect, to discuss some of the industry practices and key considerations for migrations. Welcome, Alex. I'm excited to have you on the masterclass today and to discuss the upcoming LTSR release.
Thank you, Steve. Glad to be here. I just wanted to start out by saying, welcome everybody. We are going to be talking a little bit today about some forward-looking statements and some dates. So, always take that in mind that this is dates happen to change, from time to time. So don't hold us to those. But glad to be here today. So today we're introducing the new CVAD 7 2402 LTSR. This is it's been about 2 years. We had the 2203, and now we're working on the 2402 release. So just for everybody to remember, LTSRs for us is our long-term service release. So these are stable releases that come out every 2 to 3 years. They have the last 2 years of features that have gone out in them, and we provide extended support and ongoing fixes in those releases, right? Along with those, we also have current release, which come out 2 to 4 times a year. So those are much faster, and they always come out with the latest and greatest features going there, as well as our cloud service, our DAS, which those are come out about monthly releases into that. And so you always have your pick, as well. Citrix, we always have choices is one of our high pillars that we talk about. So there's always the choice here of which way you want to go when you're using Citrix DAS and Citrix virtual apps and desktops. So a little bit about LTSR and the CR. So our LTSR, we do 5 years of mainstream support. The current release is usually we do the current release, and if there's any fixes that need to come out, you always have to upgrade to the latest current release to get those fixes. So it's it's every 3 months, 3 to 4 months that we release those. They're both available online. The long-term service release, the LTSR, does have cumulative updates. So we do only provide bug fixes in those release for the 5 years that we support it. So those bug fixes usually come out every 4 to 6 months, and those include bug fixes, any security fixes that we have, and we keep going with those through the life cycle, through the life of that LTSR. We do not provide feature support or new features in those releases. We also don't do enhancements in those releases as well. So you'd have to wait for the next LTSR for those. So a lot of customers tend to choose the current release to be on the rapid release cycle and using the latest and greatest features from us. Just a little bit, here are the current releases that we have for LTSR. For those of you who are on 715, I hope there's none because that's been end of life for 2 years. But that was the last one there. 1912 is the big one that we still have customers on, and that is going to be end of life at the end of this year. So this is a big one that we want customers to move, and now is the time to start looking at 2402 and making that migration strategy. And then the current one, which was the 2203, the latest CU on that is CU4, which was released last year, and we continue to support that for a few more years. So some of the benefits for this, one, like I said before, it was a 5-year life cycle, and our customers love that because they get to spend on that, and usually it lines up pretty well with Windows Server releases and their life cycle. So that's good. The other thing is you get the last 2 years of features and innovations that have been stable, have been released, have been tested by customers. So you have a stable release that you get to try out the new features. For this one in particular, for 2402, We do have the cloud provisioning capabilities that are back. That was we kind of removed that in 2203, but it is back now with Citrix Universal License. The other thing we do is we do all the validation with common criteria, 508 and FIPS. We run through all that to get the latest validation of compliance. And as well, we also have the Citrix Workspace app that does have an LTSR version, and we continue to support that as well through the life cycle of this release. So for the 1912 folks, there was a lot of changes that went into from there to 2203. I'm not going to get into these because these are kind of things that are over 2 years, but I just wanted to show that we do, for every 2 years, there's a lot of things that come in, and this has been a lot of that. And so you're getting, if you're deciding to go into 2402, you'd get all this plus what we've done in the last 2 years. Now, this is not everything. There's no way we can fit that in one slide. This is just some of the highlights, and I'll be going into some of these as a teaser for you. But just a quick view on some of these. We've done a lot of work on the Linux VDA side under workloads. We've done some work on the HCX 3D Pro. We added support for Windows 10 and Windows 11 multi-session in Azure over the last 2 years. Web Studio is a big one that I'll get to in a second. And, we also added support for the latest, SQL Server 2022, Server Core 2022, auto scale features. Session recording is a big one under security. We have done a lot of optimizations and enhancements in that area, and we continue to do that and provide the latest and greatest security compliance in that area. Secure private access is another one that's coming on-prem. It's not in the LTSR release, but it's something that you can use if you want to. It's compatible with our CVAD LTSR. On the end user experience side, we are definitely supporting Microsoft Teams. We've had huge updates there with the latest Teams 2.0, and a lot of performance improvements have gone into that. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the HCX improvements. That's huge. So Web Studio now in LTSR, this is probably the single biggest benefit you'll get by moving to 2402, moving away from the MMC console. Now you have a full Web Studio support with all the latest and greatest features that we have on DAS are now down on on-prem. The cool thing about this is it also introduces REST APIs. And for those of you that like automation and like writing scripts, in the hybrid world that we live in, the scripts that you write for CVAD, and if you're using DAS as well, you can continue to write both. The REST APIs are the same, so you could create one set of automation tools for on-prem and cloud, which is a huge benefit and a time saver for administrators. This becomes a simple install. We do all the prereqs as part of the meta installer that we use for CVAD, so it's a simple point and click and gets installed. It could be on a separate machine, or it could be running on the DDC, and it's your choice. So this is definitely a big one that you should try it out when you get a chance. Along with that, and one of the big things why I love it is we get autoscale as well. So now autoscale is available for on-prem. Autoscale is one of our best features that we have on CVAD and DAS, which is the ability to do advanced power management on your workloads, specifically, non-persistent, persistent workloads. We get to drive that power management solution to help drive your and save costs on especially when you're provisioning to cloud, but also on-prem as well. We have schedule-based, load-based settings. We do dynamic session timeouts. We even have ways to tag machines to have separate timeouts for those. So it's a very robust tool. We have between 50 to 70% of our users, depending what situation you're running, what use case, have autoscale turned on in DAS today. So this is going to be a huge benefit for administrators. Another one for Workspace app. We talked a little bit about this, but we've seen a lot of improvements in our client over the last few years. There's been a lot of UI enhancements. We introduced a new activity manager. We have ability now to go through and select, if you're using persistent desktops, you can have things in there to be able to power manage that. We do have auto update version control. that could stay there and do silent background updates. There's a lot of enhancements that we've had in here. Another one in here is the Citrix Enterprise Browser is also in there, which it is LTSR compatible and allow you to provide a enterprise browser that has security policies in place to give you a secure browser for your web and SaaS apps. And one thing to note in here is that this support timeline is 3 years, and we do community CU updates every 2 months. So on the HDX side, we have many slides of HDX features, but one that I just wanted to mention is the new codecs that we've introduced, AV1 in particular and H265. These have been a huge performance improvement. You can see amazing graphics with them, with reduced CPU utilization and reduced bandwidth. So in our test and performance, we have a blog that came out that you can go and look up it. The name there is on the bottom, where you can see the resolution, some of the numbers that have come out with that. This is a real game changer. It helps a lot, keeps us on the edge, and it helps provide the best performance for HDX. This does require NVIDIA GPU for the AV1 codec in particular, and NVIDIA or Intel on the client side for doing the decoding. But encoding on the server side does require a GPU from NVIDIA, AMD, Intel on those. Audio enhancements as well, another big area that we've seen a lot of improvements. We now have the ability to do sync up your audio devices inside your session with your local. So if once you log in and you create your session, you don't have to go back to your local settings to change audio devices. Everything is synced, volume is synced, so it's a really natural experience that you get. And we've also done a lot of work on iOS as well. We've done echo cancellation and EDT lossy on the Windows side. So a lot of features. Again, this is a feature, very high level teasers that we're showing you just to get you excited. We're going to have a full webinar on what's new and dive into all of these. So I'm just quickly wanting to go through all these to get you excited for LTSR. This is a big one. So Storefront is getting some love now. We have been working a lot on the Storefront side. So we're introducing the new Storefront UI, which looks a lot like the Workspace UI for DAS users that have been using it. Relax. The old UI is still there, so you'll be able to pick which one. So don't freak out. You'll be able to slowly go and test it and make sure it's ready. And whenever you're ready, you can move over. So for LTSR, we'll be supporting both. But it is we've had a lot of requests for this to improve the to kind of modernize our Storefront UI. So this is a big one as well. So in terms of OS support, I think the big one here to note is with the 2402 support. We're not supporting obviously 2012 R2 that's shipped that went away in 1912, but we are maintaining support for 2016, 2019, and 2022, as well as those 2016 and 2019. 2016 is end of life. Requires extended support, and 2019 will be soon this year as well. So for anyone moving over, those are the OSs that we'll continue to support. On the VDA side, very similar, as well as including Windows 10, Windows 11 from the desktop side. So when is this coming out? So we're targeting the first half of this year. Right now, the best thing you could do if you're super excited about this is we have our early adopter release that's available. So if you go to citrix.com/downloads, there's an early adopter release category there. You can click on that and download the latest one so you can start trying it out right away. We also have the client that's available as part of that image, so you can test this out. If you don't want to mess with your current system and you want to create a new one, I suggest using the auto config tool to migrate your site settings over, do some testing, and when you're ready, you can use do the full migration that Emma is going to be talking about after this. But I wanted to kind of give you a sneak peek because there's one big thing. We just mentioned a couple of features, but if I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are all the features that have gone in the last 2 years. And it really is, when you think of everything that Citrix is doing and bringing customer value across all of our components, it's a huge list, right? From HDX, user experience, our workload, and operational efficiency, continuing to provide the latest and greatest support for new devices and peripherals, from our PVS and MCS. We have a slew of features that come out. We continue to support the latest and greatest OSs, the greatest and latest hypervisors, all the new features that come out on Azure, AWS, and GCP. We're always on top of those. Our choice and flexibility is probably one of the big differentiators for Citrix. The list just keeps on and on. I'm not going to go through all these. Again, we'll have a separate webinar to kind of dive into these. But there is a whole lot of features that have come in through this. So I just want to leave that. There's one more thing I wanted to talk about, which is, we currently have our CUs coming out this year as well. So if you are a 1912, we do have CU9 coming out, in the middle of the year. For 2203, we have CU5 coming out later this year, and probably another one towards the end of the year. So this is a great time to kick the tires on 2402. I highly suggest it. There's a lot of features that you're missing out on if you stay on these older levels, but we do have the continued support there. So we're not, we're going to continue to support those to the end of life. And if you're interested, we do have a LTSR compliant tool that you can download and check to make sure that you have the latest components and they're all LTSR compliant. So that's I'll leave you with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alex. Next, Emma and Egil join me to discuss the industry-leading practices and key considerations for migration. Welcome, Emma and Egil, to the Citrix Masterclass.
Thanks, Stephen. As mentioned, Egil and I will be considering supportability considerations and upgrade paths for the next Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops LTSR. So we'll go ahead and get started. As mentioned, our agenda for this part of the masterclass is to discuss supportability considerations and also migration tips and tricks when moving to the next LTSR. And we'll be sure to include any helpful links that will be included in the blog after this masterclass. So first up is supportability. So there are a couple of key supportability considerations when it comes to supporting a Citrix environment. First up is operating systems. So Citrix supports Windows operating systems for our infrastructure VMs, such as delivery controllers and Storefront, and we also support Linux for VDAs as well. So all of your operating systems in use in the environment must be supported or have a valid vendor maintenance contract in order to be supported by Citrix. So if you need to upgrade your operating system, we also generally recommend building fresh VMs, as we don't generally support in-place OS upgrades on VMs. So around operating systems, in our experience in the field, often the reason for outdated operating systems can be applications. So if you have any applications that are currently on older or out of support operating systems, we highly recommend talking to your application teams now to get that process started to move those applications over to supported operating systems so they can continue to be used in your CVAD environment. When you're upgrading your operating systems, you want to ensure that you're moving to an operating system with a decent maintenance window, because you don't want to have to update those machines again in the near future. For example, if you're currently on OS 2012 R2, you probably don't want to move to OS 2016, as that maintenance window is closing shortly. You're going to want to move ideally to 2022 or even 2019. So again, for operating systems, you want to make sure those are fully supported or under valid maintenance contracts in order to be supported by Citrix. Next up is SQL consideration. So Microsoft SQL is required for hosting the CVAD and provisioning databases. And again, SQL version compatibility is required to maintain support. We do have a support article out there that lists the different supported versions of SQL for the different CVAD LTSR versions. And your SQL databases can be updated in place or migrated to new SQL infrastructure, whatever works best for your infrastructure teams. And lastly, hypervisors are another key consideration. Citrix is hypervisor agnostic. We have a list of supported hypervisors that we support. Again, you just want to ensure your hypervisor platform is supported by your vendor of choice and is also compatible with the Citrix LTSR version. And again, we have support documentation out there about which hypervisors we support, as well as the supported versions. So just to highlight, if any of your supporting infrastructure for the Citrix environment is out of date, either your operating system, SQL database, or hypervisor, if it's not supported by the original vendor, it is not supported by Citrix. So we want to ensure your environment is fully supported by all your vendors in order to take advantage of support from Citrix. So that's what we have when it comes to supportability considerations.
Emma, just before we move on, we've already got a quick question on the chat. So is it possible to have a mix of LTSR VDA versions across the environment as we move into the upcoming LTSR release?
Yes, we do support having a mix of LTSR VDAs. All of our LTSRs are backwards compatible. So for example, this next LTSR will support 2203 VDAs. However, what is important to note is we don't support LTSR versions past end of life. So if any specific LTSR versions, say like 715, that is end of life, so we would not support that. However, if you have a mix of LTSR versions that are still supported, are not past end of life, those would still be supported within your environment.
Okay, and is there any considerations around machine catalog functionality with those mixed VDA versions?
Yes, so you want to make sure when you're deploying those machine catalogs that you select the correct functional level. That is a setting within the machine catalog. And what that functional level does is it lets your site know what the VDA version is, and that's helpful because our VDAs, of course, all have different features depending on which version you're at. So some of the more recent features are dependent on a higher functional level. So you want to ensure when you have mixed VDA machine catalogs that you're selecting the correct functional level in order to take advantage of the features of the VDA you're using.
Great, thank you, Emma.
Of course. So again, just some important callouts when going into the next year. First up is that CVAD 1912 LTSR is going to be the last LTSR to support Server 2012 R2. So if you have any applications that still require 2012 R2, start talking to your application teams now, so that way you can work on migrating those to a more recent operating system. And as I just mentioned, while our LTSRs are backwards compatible, end-of-life software is not supported. So you can have 1912 VDAs up until it goes end of life, which is in December of this year. So past December of this year, 1912 VDAs will not be supported by Citrix. Also, we want to make sure we're maintaining LTSR compliance. So not all of our features have LTSR versions. However, you do require a certain minimum version to be compatible with the LTSR across your Citrix infrastructure. So we always recommend implementing the most recent version. However, you can check our documentation for the minimum version required for the next LTSR. And with that, we also have some resources available. These links will be sent out afterwards or be included in the blog. As you can see there, Stephen actually put together a great supportability chart. This is based on the 2311 CR. However, it's going to be useful when preparing for the LTSR next as well. So be sure to check out all these great resources to make sure your environment is compatible with the next LTSR version. So next, we're going to get into some migration considerations for migrating to the next LTSR. And at Citrix, we have two main upgrade paths. So first is an in-place upgrade, and the other is a parallel upgrade. So we're going to get into considerations for both. So first off, we're going to get into in-place upgrades. So in-place upgrades are a very stable way to upgrade if you don't need to overhaul your entire site infrastructure or update the operating systems of your infrastructure VMs. The order of the upgrade, as shown in this image on the left, is listed out in the product docs. So this is a specific supported order for the in-place upgrade. So you need to upgrade in this order in order to maintain support. While there are ways to minimize downtime caused by in-place upgrades, such as forcing LHC mode, we do always recommend upgrading during maintenance windows to reduce the impact to your end users. So for example, by utilizing LHC mode, you can enable users to continue to connect during the outage caused by the site database upgrade, which does require a small amount of downtime as that's being upgraded in place. You don't have to upgrade all of your infrastructure in one go in one day. As mentioned before, our LTSR are backwards compatible, so you can upgrade in phases. You can upgrade in phases. So for example, if you want to update Storefront one day and delivery controls the next day, that's fine. Although it is important to note, we do not support mixed infrastructure LTSR versions long term. So that's fine in the short term while you're upgrading. However, long term, you do need to ensure all your infrastructure VMs are in the same version in order to maintain support. There are a few in-place upgrade tips and tricks that are good to know. So first up are some storefront considerations. If you have any customizations on Storefront, such as in your web config file or your default ICA file, it is important to back those up as those can be lost during the in-place upgrade, and then you can re-copy in those files to maintain your customizations. Additionally, concurrent upgrades of your Storefront servers in your server group is not supported. They do need to be updated sequentially. So our recommended method actually in our documentation is to break the server group, update your primary in place, and then basically do a fresh install on your supporting server groups and then rejoin them to the primary. There are a couple of recommendations we have for in-place upgrades. So first, ensure all your operating systems are up to date prior to upgrade. And of course, take snapshots for rollback. That's highly important in case you run into any issues. You can just quickly roll back your changes and your environment will be good as new. This also includes backing up your SQL databases just in case. And you do want to make sure that you have tested your backup and restore methods before upgrading to ensure everything works smoothly. Additionally, you want to fully document the migration path, including the point of no return, so that way you have everything prepped and prepared before you go into a migration so you're set up for success. So with that, that's all your some of your considerations for in-place upgrades. Next, I'm going to hand it off to Egil to go over parallel upgrades.
Thank you, Emma. So yeah, you have the parallel upgrades, and what we have to look at in the case of that is that the parallel upgrade, the infrastructure and the access infrastructure are two different things. So the NetScalers are part of the access along with the storefront, and then you've got the sites, databases and sites, VDAs and everything else like that. So you do have the option with the parallel upgrades keeping the same URL or actually having a completely new URL. And this is why I say this is why the access and the site infrastructure can be separated from here. Now, what you can do is you can import and export the configurations, so you can still keep everything the same. But, and this is the big but, the versions that you import and export for Storefront must be the same. So you can't export, update Storefront, and then import again. What you have to do is export, move it to your new Storefront configuration at the version that you've currently got, import it, and then do the in-place upgrade. So there is a few caveats there. And also, don't forget that you're going to need to sort of like update any VIPs that you're using on load balancers, or God forbid any other load balancing appliances. So if we move on to the next slide, here we've got the pros and the cons of the using the same or different URLs. So the pros are there's going to be with the same URL, there's going to be less impact to the users. They're not going to have to enter in a new URL. The admin is not going to have to push out a new URL. So there's these to take into consideration. But on the flip side, you have the thing is it's harder to roll back if you make a mistake. So, and it's harder to do a phase migration, which depending on the size of your environment might be actually the only way you can go forward, because there's not a lot of large organizations that do like the big bang scenario. So when you put in a different URL, of course, this facilitates the phase migration, because you're going to have a completely new URL. So you can say Monday night, point to site B now. Tuesday night, you move the users to site B. Wednesday, move them to site B as well. And if there's a problem, you can roll everybody back to site A very, very quickly. So that's not that makes things somewhat easier. But again, you're going to have to look at the cons are things like you're going to have to open up new firewall rules. You're going to have new certificates. It will confuse possibly end users, or which site should I go to? Should I go to site A? Should I go to site B? So these are the sorts of types of things you need to consider and whether it's fit for your environment or not. If we can move to the next one. So here we've got the control layer. So this is actually your on-premises site now. Now, you can use the automated configuration tool to export and import, so backup and restore your database and configurations while you're doing the upgrade. This is actually a very simple tool to use. It's PowerShell. Again, everything will be part of the blog articles explaining how it works, but you literally just export everything into a JSON file or JSON files, and then you can import everything straight away. Again, you don't lose your configuration. You're not worrying, has the admin typed in something wrong, etc., etc. On top of the the parallel upgrades, when you're doing these extra sites, you're going to have to look at, do I actually have enough Citrix licenses and Microsoft licenses to take this into account? Now, Microsoft, you might be able to get around. Citrix licensing is a little harder, because if you've got your license server and it's got 15,000 users on it, you've got 15,000 licenses available to you. So just bear in mind when you're doing the migration that you've got sufficient licenses to help you go through there, or you've got sufficient gap when you do get the warning that you're oversubscribed, and so that you can come down in time, so that you don't actually get blocked from adding any more users in. And also, you with the VDAs, when you move them over, you will have to set either via GPO or when you go into the registry, however you've set your delivery controllers, you're going to have to update those accordingly. Okay, so of course, then we've got things like the Workspace app. Now, this is with LTSRs. You have, as Emma has pointed out, you have different versions of LTSRs. Workspace app is one of them that has LTSR. Now, you can use the LTSR. You can also use the current release versions with of Workspace app, but you must have some way of updating these. Now, this can either be done through the Global App Configuration Service, which is part of Citrix Cloud, and it can actually be used without having a cloud subscription. You can just set everything up again. This will be covered in our docs. Or you have something like SCCM to do this rollout for you. Now, when it comes to the VDAs, obviously you've got the non-Citrix provision VDAs. This may be you've just deployed an image, added the VDA to it, and that's it. So it's not managed at all by Citrix. You can do the in-place upgrade of the VDA there, then re-provision out the machine. MCS and PVS, well, they're all pretty similar. We can take a copy of that image. We can update those VDAs. We can roll those VDAs out very, very quickly. And anybody that's ever used MCS or PVS, you know how easy it is to roll back any issues that you see. So we do have that that ability with MCS and PVS. We just, of course, have to make sure that again, PVS is all up to the relevant levels, either LTSR or current release. App layering is again the similar thing. You take out the platform layer, you make a copy of that platform layer or a version of that platform layer, you update the VDA software within there, and then you add that image, that layer, back into the image, and you then deploy that using PVS, MCS, or however you're going to deploy that image.
Sorry, Egil, to interject. So,
No problem.
with the resource layer, I've got a question on the chat about Citrix Workspace Environment Manager. So, is there an LTSR version of the Weem and Weem agent to be deployed?
No, that's one thing that we don't have an LTSR version of is Weem. That is updated every 3 months and follows the CVAD cadence. So what we would recommend is actually bringing your Weem environment up to the latest version of Weem, depending on how far back you are using Weem.
Perfect. Thanks for that.
Okay, so parallel upgrades, there's not so many gotchas or anything like that as the in-place one, but obviously the biggest one is if you're going to be deploying a parallel environment, you have to make sure you've got enough hardware. Now, not everybody has a massive environment with a massive amount of hardware to be able to do an exact like-for-like migration. So think about this and plan this compute capacity correctly, so you don't stop halfway through the migration because you just cannot migrate any more people and you're stuck. So this all comes into the thing of fully document your migration path. How are you going to migrate your users from site A to site B, whether that takes days, weeks, or God forbid, months. But that, again, that can be down to service windows, that can be down to the size of your environment, etc. And also, the biggest thing that people do forget is confirming all the prerequisites. I have been on site so many times to do other projects, and customers have not checked the prerequisites in place, and then we end up running around trying to make sure that they're in place as quickly as possible. And things like firewall rules, certificates, they may seem like they are something very quick to implement, but most companies have lead times on doing this, and this can really actually influence any of your migration plans. So yeah, please check all prerequisites and make sure that they are in place in time. So we've got here the migration plan, and this is like a nice little coin drop system. As you go through, it explains to you how you do the migration, whether you're doing the same URL, whether you're not doing the same URL, and what needs to be in place on that one. So I'm not really going to go through and explain it all because it's probably easier that you guys read through this, and it will make sense. And if you have any questions, throw them in the chat, and we can answer them for you there. So these are the resources that we keep talking about. The product documentation. We do have an LTSR migration tech paper, which you'll find on TechZone. We do look at the site aggregations, so Storefront can aggregate sites together and how to handle that if you've got all of that configured. Also, a lot of people do forget, how do you talk to the end users? How do you let the end users know? So we do have some links on some suggestions on how to communicate all these changes to end users. Again, you've got the automated configuration tool that has all of the little commandlets, examples, etc., on how to implement that. And then, of course, yeah, you do want some form of test plan once you've done any of your migrations, whether they're in place or parallel upgrades. You want to be able to test everything before it is released out to the users in any shape or form. So we have those test plans for you as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Egil and Emma, for that. So I'm just going to jump straight over to some questions we've received in the Q&A chat. So we've got a question in relation to a customer that's currently on CVAD 1912 LTSR. Are they able to do a direct upgrade to the newest CVAD, or do they have to do an in-place upgrade to all of the LTSRs?
That's a great question. Based on my last conversation with product management, if they are on CU5 and above on 1912, they will be able to upgrade directly to the next LTSR. So they won't have to migrate to 2203 in between. Just another consideration for that is just double check the operating system of your infrastructure. As mentioned, 1912 is the last one to support 2012 R2. So if your infrastructure VMs are on 2012 R2, you'll have to build fresh VMs on a supported OS. So that would be the only caveat there.
Are there any additional infrastructures required to support the upcoming CVAD LTSR?
Well, yes, funnily enough, there might be. I'm not going to use the typical political answer that consultants give, which it depends. There might be a requirement for it. If you do use the Web Studio in larger deployments, we will then recommend that Web Studio, as it is running on IIS, will require extra hardware, because you don't want to be running everything on the same delivery controller like you are. Smaller environments, it doesn't matter as much. It depends on how you've deployed your environment.
Okay, perfect. Are there any plans? So we've got for Storefront, are there any plans to change or within the LTSR to update the user experience? Are there any changes there?
Yes, so a new UI is coming in tech preview to the next LTSR for Storefront. It is the UI that is currently available in Workspace, if you use that as well, or have seen our blogs about that. It is also currently available actually as a tech preview in 23.11. So if you want to test out the new UI, you can install 23.11 CR in your test environment and take a look. It is not a forced change. It is currently just an option in the GUI to switch over to the new UI versus the old UI. So yes, there is a new UI coming. It is in tech preview, however. So it will be available for you to take a look at and play around within your test or dev environments.
So fantastic. I'd like to thank my guest speakers today, Alex, Emma, and Egil, for discussing the upcoming Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktops LTSR, providing an overview of the new capabilities, discussing the supportability, and providing key considerations for migration. Thank you for your questions in the chat. We will create a blog with all of the questions answered and submitted during this masterclass session, and we will also provide a link to the on-demand recording. We have some exciting content and speakers lined up to cover our entire Citrix portfolio, so make sure you tune in for the upcoming masterclasses.